This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the City of Salmon Arm Development and Planning Services Committee meeting of Monday, November the 6th. We're meeting in virtual fashion. We have some councillors with us virtually, Councillor Lindgren and Councillor Lavery. Good morning to the two of you. Nice to see you. Councillor Ganella, Councillor Wallace Richmond, Councillor Flynn, and myself in the gallery. Councillor Cannon is absent today. We also have some of our senior staff, Rob Neuenhausen, Director of Engineering and Public Works. We have Melinda Smurl, Manager of Planning and Building. We have Chris Larson, Planning Assistant. We have Corporate Officer Sue Wood and Executive Assistant Barb Pitafont, as well as members of the public. So welcome, everyone. Planning Official, that was the word I was looking for. Sorry, Mr. Larson, Planning Official. So good morning to you all. I'd like to acknowledge that we're gathering here on the traditional territory of the Secwepemc people, with whom we share these lands and where we live and we work together. We have an agenda in front of us. I'll check with the corporate officer to see if there's any changes to the agenda.
Nothing from staff, Your Worship.
Great, thank you. I will accept the motion then to adopt the agenda as presented. Councillor Wallace Richmond will move. Councillor Ganella will second. Any discussion on the motion? Call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Our second piece of business is approval of the minutes of the October 16th meeting, and those are attached in your agenda. If I could have a mover and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Lindgren, for moving. Seconder, Councillor Ganella, thank you. Any discussion around those minutes? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Our next item is disclosure of interest. We have two items this morning on the agenda. I'll check to see with councillors if any councillor has a disclosure of interest over either of those two items. Please declare now. Okay, seeing none, we'll proceed with our business. So under tab 6, the first piece of business is a draft tree protection bylaw. I know there's been a lot of work done on this by both our EAC and also by staff. There is a motion for consideration. If I could have a mover, Councillor Lindgren, if you're so would like to move it as a chair. Thank you for that moving of the motion. Seconder, Councillor Ganella, thank you. I will pass it over to our Manager of Planning and Building to outline the draft tree protection bylaw.
Thank you, Your Worship. The proposed tree protection bylaw includes a number of amendments to the existing tree protection bylaw and imposes significantly more restrictions on the cutting of trees and represents a new approach in tree management. Some noted changes are itemized in the staff report, and I'll just highlight a few, including first that the proposed bylaw removes exemptions to lands that are zoned industrial and removes the provision that allows for 5% of tree cover to be removed on residential lands. Exemptions also still do apply for forestry, park, and agricultural purposes, so trees could be removed in those circumstances or situations. Also, when a development permit, building permit, or subdivision application is made, a tree cutting permit will run concurrently with those applications to be considered in concert with the pending application. A permit, however, would still be required if there were tree cutting occurring outside of those applications. Tree removal, it would be restricted on slopes greater than 30% and require a geotechnical engineer in those situations. And in the case of riparian areas, a QEP report or a qualified environmental professional would have to provide a report to the city with regard to tree removal in those circumstances. The proposed bylaw includes a tree replacement and maintenance requirements table, and it's based on lot area, and that's included in the draft bylaw in front of you, and a cash in lieu allowance when the prescribed replacement cannot or is not met by the applicant or property owner. Accompanying the amendments is a proposal to impose fines for cutting without a permit or removing damaged trees without a permit. There are new fines for cutting a landscape or wildlife tree, cutting trees in a riparian area or floodplain area, and failing to replace the required replacement trees. At this stage, staff are recommending that the draft bylaw be forwarded to the Environmental Action Committee for recommendations on possible public engagement and consultation, and that a draft of the bylaw would then be returned to council once the EAC has provided their recommendations.
Great, thank you very much. So as council can see from the motion, it's our chance to provide comment. The motion is to return the draft bylaw after it's been seen by council to the EAC to come up with recommendations on possible public engagement and consultation options. So I'll open it up to councillors for any questions they might have, or if they have any comments they'd like to make at this time. Councillor Lindgren, can we begin with you? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. And thank you to staff for all the work that they've done on this new bylaw or this changed bylaw. The Environmental Advisory Committee has been working on this for well over a year now, and staff have been really helpful, really moving this forward. It's been a really good collaboration. I think it's pretty well recognized now that best practice is to try to keep tree cover in light of climate change and the need for shade, and environmentally we know that it's better for both the people that live here and for the animals and birds that use them. And so I'm really happy to see that we've got to this stage, and the Environmental Advisory Committee is looking forward to a final review.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lindgren. We'll go to Councillor Flynn next.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I do want to thank the EAC and staff for all the work put into this. Very detailed. It does look like most of it is very much following some of the best practices elsewhere. I want to understand the motion, because the Environmental Advisory Committee was significantly involved last spring, and now this is going back to them only for recommendations on possible public engagement and consultation. Would it not be advisable that we as council and staff determine who this should be sent to for consultation? SCIP makes sense to me. Our economic development makes sense to me. Obviously, it makes sense to go back to EAC now that there's a draft bylaw. So I'm wondering why the recommendation says just to the Environmental Advisory Committee, and why it's up to them to determine who it goes out to.
Yeah, thank you for those comments, Councillor Flynn. And I think what we're looking for here are those that very input that you just mentioned.
Okay.
Because I also thought about those groups, and so I think we have the EAC as an advisory committee. We have provided them the opportunity to process this for us, of course, with recommendations. But if there are particular groups that you're feeling should be included in their consultation and recommendations around public engagement, now would be a great time to make them.
Okay, well, I do feel there are other groups, and I will wait to hear what others have to say. But we've seen just last week potential unintended consequences of very well-meaning legislation being proposed by the provincial government to improve housing. And we know that's going to have impacts on us and other communities. In my opinion, we spend so much time talking about affordable housing. I think the building development community needs to see this, and we need to understand the cost implications if there are some. I'm not saying that protecting trees shouldn't be number one, and I agree with all of the comments, but I feel that this would be too narrow to have it just go back to EAC.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. And yeah, we do our best work when we're thorough, and we follow process and we don't rush. And so I think we're trying to follow those steps, and those suggestions you made, I think have been noted. And so any other suggestions, of course, most welcome. We'll go to Councillor Lavery next.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. And I'd like to thank staff, EAC, and as well Councillor Lindgren for her leadership on this. It's wonderful seeing this coming forward. There's lots to consider. I do think just sort of in conjunction with Councillor Finn's comments, I think that when the draft protection bylaw comes in for us, there'll be lots of opportunity for widespread input. So that's, I think we should have that, and I think that will be a spot there for it. I have two minor questions, Your Worship, and then just some general comments through you to staff for the questions. Is the thinking that, and I don't think it was there, I might have missed, but I don't think it was there, that the fee for application would be on a full cost recovery basis? That's my first question.
Ms. Smurl?
Through your worship, the current tree cutting permit fee is $25. So in anticipation, I'd expect that the fee would go up, but that would be following that consultation with the public.
Continue, Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thanks. And so I just perhaps now a comment, but I certainly think that it's incumbent on us to make sure that our processes are paid in full by the applicant on a full cost recovery basis. My second question, Your Worship, has to do with that. And again, there's lots of great stuff in here. And to my general understanding, it fits best practice. There's a comment about, I'm just looking for it, but essentially there may be a deposit required. And I'm wondering just what staff's thinking was on that, and would there be criteria for that, or how would that be determined, the may part about a deposit?
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. Ms. Smurl?
That'd be section 8.9, Your Worship, and the note says possible collection of securities.
Yeah, thank you for that direction, Councillor Lavery, and our Manager of Planning and Building is just reviewing, and she's going to get back to us here shortly.
Thank you, Your Worship. And through your worship, yes, there's conditions in the Local Government Act in which we can require landscape deposit or landscape security, and this section of the bylaw would impose that to those particular applications and in relation to the tree replacement that's covered off in the rest of the bylaw.
Please continue, Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. As we go forward in the process, when it comes to council, I'd be interested in sort of the breadth of those considerations. We don't have to do that here now. I'm fully agree with the wide engagement that's been referenced, both with suggestions from EAC as well as Councillor Flynn and others have suggested. On page 10 of the staff report, I think it's a very genuine comment about this increases staff workload. And I would just make a general comment here right now. I am open to staff coming forward with, so number one, I don't want to delay this. I want it in here as soon as possible, number one. Number two, certainly open to all sorts of, other than just adding on more to staff, suggestions from staff about how to handle that load. And I think we're going to need to determine what that is, but is that extra staffing? Is that perhaps contracted out professional services or whatever else? But I don't want to see A, staff overloaded, or B, the adoption of this bylaw when we get to it delayed because of staff capacity. So thanks, Your Worship. This, when it came out, when I read it, this is long overdue. There's been a lot of hard work, and look forward to the process as we go forward in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. We'll go to Councillor Wallace Richmond next.
Thanks, Your Worship. Very much appreciate this updated bylaw. the change in name particularly. And as a city, we have a fairly comprehensive referral system in place, extending to the design review committee, economic development, sometimes the school district, our Indigenous neighbors, as well as interior health, healthy built environment team. And it would be my wish that those groups are also engaged in this process.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wallace Richmond. Thank you for including those suggestions. Is there any other councillors who wish to speak to the motion? Okay, maybe just add my my few comments. First of all, again, thanks as others have done so. You know, one of the really easy pieces, but it's a big messaging piece, and it was a suggestion from the EAC, was the change of name of this bylaw to the tree protection bylaw, which I think gives a message right off the bat about what we're talking about. And many of the details that are suggested flush that out, that we are looking as much as possible at protection of trees. And how to do that is now what we're talking about. How can we do that best so that it's going to suit everyone? I think there's no doubt the community, all parts of the community, believe that trees are important. We also know that moving forward is important, and development and housing is important. So how can we make those two mesh? That's what this is all about. Councillors have pointed out the motion piece. So what would happen if this motion passes is the EAC would listen to what we've had to say, come back to council. Council may choose to consult over and above what the suggestions come back from EAC. It's in our hands. That will be our decision, our choice. But the EAC has handled it to here, and I think it's fair to pass it their way. They're fully engaged to come back with recommendations, and then council can take that from there. So I'll certainly support the motion. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Worship. Just trying to envision if this is supported and implemented, which I'm pretty sure in some way, shape, or form the new tree protection bylaw will be. If, as an example, when we have a development permit, let's say for a commercial project, there's a significant contribution to landscaping that they have to put in reserve. Is that correct? Or pay us in advance?
Director of, or Manager of Planning and Building.
Through your worship, yes. At the development permit stage, we do have a landscape security which addresses on-site landscaping. However, the tree removal or the replacement of trees on the site that were there previous to the development going forward, those would be part of a separate security under this bylaw.
So we would be seeing two pieces of security, and okay, that's I wanted to understand that, because again, anything we're doing to increase costs up front of development, I don't think is positive, but it may be required. I'm just trying to understand what without seeing something, a sample situation, to try to understand the magnitude of those deposits, because one of the biggest complaints we hear from the development community is how much money they have to put up front before they can sell lots. So I'm concerned about that, but I'll wait to hear that input from others.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Just on that particular note, I think back to the Lawson building, you may have been thinking of that one as well, where the development permit, the landscape piece included trees that were already on location, as well as additions to them. So I think that's an important part about trying to retain, where possible, the trees that are on site when possible.
And could I ask staff one more question?
Yes, please do.
I agree with Councillor Lavery that we need to understand the staffing component and the impact. I'm guessing, though, staff doesn't really know what the impact is going to be until we see the final and have it actually implemented and what impact it'll have. So I agree that we shouldn't delay this for staffing, but I think we need to be adaptable enough to deal with it properly. There's no use putting in this bylaw if we can't enforce or manage it. Does staff have a feel for how long they think this might have to be in place for till we really understand the implications?
Ms. Merle, are you able to comment on that?
No, Your Worship, not fully.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay.
I think what I could share with council and Councillor Flynn is senior staff, as in past years prior to budget, is looking at all of the staffing components in the city. And they will come forward to council with their priorities. And it's good to hear from council about Councillor Lavery in particular about his commitment to this piece. Of course, there's other staffing needs throughout the city, but that will come forward. And of course, council can deviate from those recommendations. That's usually useful for us, though. Any other comments from council? Thank you for your input. I will call the question then. All those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Thanks to the AC for their work to date and to staff. We'll look forward to a return of this after it goes to council. Okay, we will go to item 6.2, which is an official community plan amendment to application OCP 4000-56 located at 1821 9th Avenue Northeast. The owners is a company, Lakeside Bowling Limited, to agents IBA Architecture and Company. The proposal is MR to HC. There is a motion for consideration. If I could have a mover and a seconder to get it on the floor. Councillor Flynn will move and Councillor Ganella will second. Thank you very much. And I think our planning official, I think Mr. Larson is going to speak to this for us. Good morning, Mr. Larson. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you. This proposal involves two subject parcels, which combined are approximately 1.6 acres in area on 9th Avenue Northeast, south of the Trans-Canada Highway. The western parcel is designated as medium density residential land in the official community plan, and it's zoned R1 in the zoning bylaw. The eastern parcel is designated for commercial use in the OCP and is zoned C3 service commercial, and that's presently the location of Lakeside Bowling. The purpose of this application ultimately is to rezone both parcels to C6 to allow for future commercial and residential use on site, which is shown in the attached development concept within the staff report. This development, as proposed, would be subject to review through a development permit application. The proposed OCP redesignation of the western parcel, which is the residential parcel at this point in time, would extend the commercial OCP designation from the adjacent parcel and would create a contiguous OCP designation across both subject parcels. The site has reasonable highway access, and this particular development proposal outlined results in the creation of multifamily housing. As such, the amendment of the OCP for the western parcel is supported by staff.
Thank you very much, Mr. Larson, and we'll do this piece first, and then if this goes through, we'll talk about the zoning. So I'll ask if there's representation who would like to speak to this item this morning. If there is, please either unmute or come forward. Raman, are you here to speak to this item?
Hi, Your Worship. Thank you very much for the chance, and thank you for Mr. Larson. The owner of these properties, he wants to rezone these two lots to occupy 83 unit apartment over the bowling area, and so it is a 6-story apartment, and also all the parking spots located on the surface of the properties. As we aim to follow all the zoning bylaw and the required building code in case it is supported, the rezoning is supported, and for now, this drawing is a conceptual drawing. We just try to indicate a schematic layout for the site plan and also prepare schematic 3D to show the size of the building. But later, when we start the development permit, we will follow and design the form and the character of the building in coordination with the planning department as well. And I'm happy to answer any question regarding the drawings or the type of the project.
Great. Thank you, Rahman. Thank you, first of all, for being here this morning and for reviewing a summary of the concept for this property. I'm going to open it up to councillors. If you have any questions for Rahman or for staff or any comments you'd like to make on the OCP proposal, please indicate now. Councillor Wallace Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship. Through you to staff, did I read in the report that C6 doesn't allow for housing, or am I misunderstanding that?
Mr. Larson?
The C6 zone does allow for upper floor dwelling units, so it does allow for a residential component.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Lavery, please go ahead.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. I have some questions for the proponent and then perhaps for staff as well. So good morning, Mr. Bistoun.
Good morning. Thank you much.
If we could turn to, and the first couple are small things, but they're kind of niggly things for me. If we could turn to Appendix 5, please. And I'm operating off the PDF as opposed to eScribe, Your Worship. But there is a reference under Section 4.0. We recommend that the City of Kelowna allow for rezoning. And I do think if this needs to go forward, we need to, it's small and niggly, but I do think we need to reference the appropriate city. That would be number one. And so if the proponent can have that ready as we go into the next process, that would be great. I
can see he's got that. Thank you, Councillor Lavery. Appreciate your detail. Thank you very much. Continue,
I must admit,
please.
when I looked, thanks, Your Worship, I looked at the concept, I was going, wow, and then Kelowna jumped up. Under 2.0 project description, the owner of 1881 and 1821, rezoning from, it says C2 and R1, and I think that should be C3 on R1. And I may be wrong on that, but that's what the motion says. And so again, perhaps I leave that to the proponent and staff to clarify that if need be.
Thanks, you. Just before we leave that, I'm going to get staff to, we want to make sure we've got this right. The motion reads C3, which is correct, I believe. Yes. So that should read C3. Thank you, Councillor Lavery, in that in Section 2 of Appendix 5.
Thanks, Your Worship. And I'll just carry on with the niggly list. This is the last one, and then I'll move on. If we could go to the section on views, which are very helpful. And especially the one that says view from the south. And I know these things are always interesting because where's north, where's south and things like that. But I think it should be, I suspect when we get to public hearing, there may be intense public interest in this. And the more clear it is for the public, the better. I think that needs to read view from the north as opposed to view from the south. I do that because I was standing there looking at that the other day, right from that spot. And I'm looking to the south, not from the south.
Yeah, so you are correct, Councillor Lavery.
Yeah. Okay, that's it for my niggly part, Your Worship. My next questions have to do with staff, and I think it's already been answered and confirmed. But where in the process, I'm thinking it's in the DPA, does more detailed information about green space, ground cover come into play?
Thank you. I'll forward your question to Mr. Larson.
Thanks, Your Worship. And Councillor Lavery has answered the question. Within his question, it would be through the development permit process that we would see more detailed building elevations and site plans, including plans from a landscape architect.
Thank you. Please continue, Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thank you, Worship. So using that, and I'll go back to the proponent on this. And it's your and I get it. Your reference that it's highly conceptual at this stage to talk about the OCP change and the rezoning. And I know that all applications are unique and different. I'd reference though another project I think that came forward from the proponent on 10th at the OCP and zoning stage. We actually had descriptions. We had conceptual design of landscaping and common space and things like that while we were in the OCP consideration. And I'm wondering if that is available as we end this process, as we enter into this process.
Sure, we'll pass that over to Roman.
Regarding the detailed site plan, for now we just have the conceptual one, the conceptual site plan to indicate the position of the proposed buildings and also the layout of the parking and the circulations. But in the next stage, or even if it is required by us for now, at this stage, we are more than happy to prepare detailed landscape plans. But for now, we only have the position of the site, the mass design, and also the parking spots.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery.
Yes, thanks, and thanks for your breadth of time here, Your Worship. So through you to staff, is the only, it's always been helpful when an OCP design or a request has come forward, an associated rezoning request, where we do have more, they're still conceptual, but more ideas of common areas, of open space, of green ideas, of buffering between it. Many, not all, but many applications for OCP changes have contained that in the OCP process. And I have to say that those are big parts of my consideration. And I've always had the understanding that it's about the only time that we can sort of request those changes or additions. So through you to staff, does a DPA process, if the OCP is granted, then permit landscaping open space changes that council might want to see?
Mr. Larson.
Thanks, Your Worship. At this point in time, the applicant, as noted, has just submitted this conceptual plan. Staff have accepted it as a concept only. At the development permit stage, that's when we would see the involvement of additional professional designers, including a landscape architect. And that's where we would see the finer details. However, staff would note that this concept as presented is showing the intent of the applicant, including whatever residential, commercial, and common space. We would see likely more design at the DP stage, and that is when those details would be finalized. At this point in time, with just the OCP application and the zoning application, the applicant is not beholden to this particular site plan. The site plan is only provided as an illustration of their intent. They're not, the development of the site isn't held to this proposal that's before us at this moment.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Councillor Lavery, any other input that you'd like to give at this time?
Yes, unfortunately, I do have a couple of your worship. So I would note that, and I get that, understood. I just want to be clear about that. But I also have to say that, and I get the highly conceptual and the somewhat more granular conceptual, and it is conceptual. But other applications have come forward and have helped guide me in my consideration of the intent of the application for what is an interesting and desirable, but fairly significant upzoning, especially if you are a neighbor. And I think that and I guess I have no power to request it or whatever else, but my suggestion would be if there can be some indication for that, these questions are going to come up. And if they're going to come up in the OCP process, and I don't use that solely to make a decision on the OCP, but I use that as a guide as well. So I would just make that comment, Your Worship. I'd also comment to the proponent, and because I've always been led to believe that it's at the OCP time to consider about it, I would like to hear more information about whether charging stations for electric vehicles will be conceptually will be provided, whether there will be storage for bicycling. I suspect this area is, I not only suspect, know this area is going to be one of our AT hubs as we get more people and traffic. And this is a secondary or third hub of our town that's there. And I am interested in what the buffering will be, especially to the west and those properties to the west. So I would just put those comments out, Your Worship. I finally have one question for staff, and that is, has staff considered the requirement of a traffic study for this proposal?
Great, thank you, Councillor Lavery. I note that the proponent is listening to your input there. I will pass your question to Mr. Larson.
At this point in time, a traffic study has not been triggered. However, at the development permit stage where we have a concept that the applicant is committed to moving forward with, that's when that requirement may come into play.
Thank you. Councillor Lavery, any further comments before I move on?
One summary. Thanks to staff for that. Thanks to the proponent for that. Most of my questions, my comments here have to do with an OCP and rezoning process that is really clear and public, and that I can guarantee these, what council decision made is up to council, but I guarantee that it will provide, I assume that it will provide clarity to the public as this comes forward. And thank you for your leniency, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery, for your questions and input. We'll go to Councillor Flynn next and Councillor Lindgren. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, as usual, at this table, we have very different approaches to this. I personally feel I have all the information I need at this stage to make a decision. We're not talking about a DP, although conceptually they are providing that it looks like there's going to be one level of commercial, which I believe would still be a bowling alley, and then housing. I'm going to focus on pre-DP, but I want to ask staff just to make sure, because I agree with Councillor Lavery that the community will want to provide input. This is a significant building, but if I was the developer, I'm not going to spend a bunch of money up front if we at this table will not even provide some indication that we would support in concept. So I understand why we're where we are, but I just want to make sure we are talking about, one, an OCP amendment, and two, potential rezoning. And this is first reading of both of those, and only first reading. And the process is to have us at this point decide if we support first reading and then do all the stuff that's been asked about moving forward. Is that correct?
Councillor Flynn, you're Correct. I'll pass it to staff. This is actually not first reading. This is just a committee,
Oh, that's
committee
right.
recommendation to
To
council.
recommend to council, sorry.
So
That was
council will be looking at
First.
this at the next meeting, but I'll pass it to staff for further clarification.
That's correct, Your Worship. At this stage, it's addressing the land use question.
Okay, and we're just making a recommendation to council. Thank you for clarifying that. I fully support this, and I'll give my rationale because I understand where Councillor Lavery is coming from and understand that there is going to be community concern because I was at this table when another tower in that area was proposed a little further, I believe, west. But things have changed a lot since then, and if you go to Appendix 3, and then I'm going to ask for Appendix 4 as well, but the major piece of the property is already, I believe, highway commercial. The small piece that's still residential is really what we're talking about, and I'm hearing from the applicant or seeing from the applicant that they need that piece to be the C6 to make a go. I fully support the concept that I see thus far and feel that taking that one piece of residential and making it C6 is a positive. If I could go to Appendix 4, and while we're on Appendix 3, I will mention that across the highway, we have actually allowed some to be residential only that was highway commercial. So in the overall plan of the city, and there was some people that didn't want to see that because they felt we needed the highway commercial. So if we could go to Appendix 4, that kind of shows what I just said, that there are residential that used to be highway commercial. And so from a concept point of view and from a land use point of view, I think this is a reasonable request. And the concept that I see, whether it ends up 4 stories, 6 stories, whatever, does make sense for housing. And the mixed use like we have down in our waterfront makes sense to me. So I very much support this first step, recommending to council that we approve or that we discuss first reading and support first reading. So as an applicant, I would understand needing more detail moving down the road, but I also understand I wouldn't be spending a bunch of money on really detailed drawings at this stage, not even knowing if the concept is supported by council. So I understand where Councillor Lavery's going. I trust that as we move through the process, if we move through the process, that we will get the detail needed. And I think this is the earliest I've seen us get DP built into land use, but I understand why, and it does make sense. But the concept that I see there, I support, and I support the application.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. We'll go to Councillor Lindgren next.
Thanks, Your Worship. My question actually was around the traffic study, and that's been asked already, so I'll just move on to comments. I'm in support of housing. I'm in support of apartment style housing. I think this is definitely a needed step in our housing ladder. My only concern at this point is the idea of making spot changes to the OCP just before we do an OCP review. And I'll think about that over the next week till we meet again. But yeah, in general, I support this concept and would move it forward to the council meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Lindgren, for your comments. Is there any other councillor who wishes to make comment or has a question? Okay, maybe I'll just make mine at this time. I think the appendix we have up, actually, we can go back to that appendix. That's a useful one, the zoning one. Yeah. So what we're being asked today really is to, yeah, okay, that's good. To take the C3 piece, which is highway commercial, and consider changing that to C6. And the difference really between those two zones is housing for the most part. There's a lot of commercial uses in both of them, but housing is the difference. So the question is, do we want housing there, especially housing with density? As a concept, to me, it makes a whole pile of sense. And you don't have to look too far on the road network to figure that out, because it's very close to easy access to the highway. It's kind of like the same idea as on the north side of the road up by Askew's, but this is on the south side. So then we have the R1 piece, 1821, which is right beside where the bowling alley is now. And in order to make this work, the proponent needs that piece, needs to change it from just residential. And as we know with provincial changes, we're talking about perhaps 4 units, perhaps 6 units there without public hearing. So to make this work, he needs that piece. To me, to move to C6, the concept, the OCP piece, I would support it. I can't see any reason why it would not fit the goals that we've been talking about. And Councillor Lindgren talked a little bit about the housing ladder, and this certainly the density piece is an important spot. We've always valued having commercial on the base floor with residential above. So I think it checks a lot of boxes for me. So I certainly will support this motion here to move it to council. It'll be nice to have some chance to think some more about it, but at this time I'm in support. Are there any other comments from councillors? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That passes unanimously. Councillors, we'll now look at 6.3. It is the same report, but this is the zoning piece. And so there is a motion for consideration. And it fits what the OCP suggestion that we will consider prior to this during hearing time. So we would only get to this piece if the OCP piece passes, of course. But if I could have a mover and a seconder, Councillor Flynn, Councillor Wallace Richmond, thank you. I'll ask Mr. Larson if he just outlined the zoning piece for us.
Thanks, Your Worship. The proposed zoning amendment to C6 aligns with the highway commercial designation as we've discussed with the official community plan. The C6 zone offers options for mixed commercial uses with residential use above. This amendment would align with the commercial objectives and policies of the official community plan. The subject parcels are considered by staff to be well suited for the proposed uses, being within close proximity to the Trans-Canada Highway, as well as in close proximity to community facilities, including the rec center, schools, and the uptown commercial area. As such, this zoning proposal is supported by staff. Of course, the applicant is here. Should we have any questions for them?
Great, thank you very much. I will ask Raban if there's anything he wants to add now that we're talking about the zoning piece.
Thank you, Your Worship. That was pretty much everything from us. And I believe regarding the details, the questions about the details, it is very fair to ask those details about the common areas, about the detailed site plan or the form and the character. As I mentioned, we definitely will look at it very seriously, and we want to work with the planning department with those details if we know that the rezoning will be supported. Yes, thank you very, very much for your time you spent on this project.
Thank you. I will open it up to councillors who may have comments or may have questions for the proponent or for staff. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I do support this, and your summary on the previous piece makes it very clear why this can make sense. And I do want to comment that I would not hold up any decisions on this for a full OCP review. Councillor Lindgren said spot zoning. I feel this is more like fringe zoning because it's a piece right beside what is already highway commercial, although that is a change. And if we really want to start filling that middle of our housing ladder, we don't want to delay this for 2 years, which is how long our OCP review will take. I think this meets all the conditions of our current OCP when you talk about what it speaks to in principle. And so I very much support these as well.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Councillor Wallace Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship, to the applicant and to staff for your work on this so far. It's just a friendly reminder to the applicant, as we remind all our applicants that as it moves through the process, if we get to public hearing, the neighbors will have an opportunity to share their questions and concerns. And so any engagement that can be done properly and prior to that is always a benefit to everyone concerned.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace Richmond, for that advice. Good advice. Any other councillors have questions or comments? Councillor Lavery, please go ahead.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. I'll definitely be shorter than the last time. I just to be clear, I fully support this concept, and for all the reasons that have been noted. I'm trying to provide, and I'm not expecting detailed stuff going forward, but essentially a little more granular conceptual ideas so the neighborhood can understand. And I think that's those are the points I was trying to make. I am, Your Worship, just as I'm not sure if it's a notice or not. I'm trying to get my head around the need for a traffic study. I will listen closely to staff suggestions on that, but I will raise that question again when we get to first reading and for staff's input on that, especially with the intersections both north and south of the underpass. So it's just a heads up to staff, I guess, on our table. I want to understand more about the need of traffic study, and I think I will go with, as usual, with staff's advice, but I want to put that cue on the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. Appreciate those comments. Councillor Flynn?
Just a process question, because I hear both Councillor Lavery and Councillor Lindgren and understand the concerns about the traffic study. With this location, obviously, nothing can happen without approval of highways. And wouldn't we just leave that to highways to determine if we need a traffic study? Or might we ask for it as well?
Director of Engineering and Public Works.
Thank you, Your Worship. So typically the traffic studies are reviewed by city staff in regards to problem intersections. We have the local knowledge, and so we can request traffic studies as well. And that could potentially be supported by the ministry, or they can request one as well.
Okay, thank you for helping me understand that.
Great. Thank you for outlining that process. Do any other councillors have questions or comments? Roman, can I just ask you two questions? They are a little bit about detail, but of course the concept drawings are public, and so I want to be able to make sure I answer the questions properly. Two questions. One, at this time, is the concept to have the bowling alley remain? And two, is the residential or C6 building, as it looks on the drawing, connected to the bowling alley?
So the existing bowling area will remain the same. So maybe we make some renovation to the exterior to just match it with the residential building, the future residential building. And regarding the second question, they are isolated from each other. So in the interior side, so that will give some privacy to the residential side, to the residential apartment, and also to the bowling area. In outside, they have two different entrances. So the entrance for the bowling area is different from separated from the apartment entrance. And yeah. Each of them, they have their own privacy. At the same time, they are in the same location.
Great, thank you. I want to be able to answer the bowler's question, so I appreciate your response. Thank you. Any other comments or questions from council? I will call the question then. All those in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you, Ramond, for being with us this morning. Appreciate your input.
Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Councillors, we have no other business this morning. I'll just check with my corporate officer. Do I need a motion here? Okay, I'm sort of starting to get it straight. Okay, I declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you very much. Thank you, staff.
Thank you.